We are live here at the Classical Theology channel. And actually, we're on YouTube and we are on Facebook for all the boomers that want to show up and help us on Facebook. But we have a wonderful show today. This is the first one of many shows that, Lord willing, we're going to be having here in the Classical Theology channel with Dr. Brian Huffling. And as you can see, we don't take ourselves too seriously here, even though the topics that we're going to be dealing with are the most serious topics in the world because they have to do with God. Usually in conversation with your family, with your loved ones, people will tell you that the last thing you need to bring up is either God or politics. And I will say to you, I submit to you that those are the actual most important things that you have to talk about. Because one of the things has to do with who rules you in under heaven, meaning on earth, and the other one is who rules you above heaven, meaning the whole of reality. And I think that that's something that we have to pay attention to because it is very important for us to be able to think clearly about these issues. And then again, I'm just a simple peasant here listening to someone who has spent decades learning about this. So if you guys are watching after the live stream, please go ahead and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. If you guys are here with us live, make sure that you let us know where you're watching from. And we are about a minute in before we go live. And we want to make sure that you guys are able to ask questions on the chat. So you can go ahead on and leave your questions now. And I will be sure to save them and we will answer them at the end. Now, this is the first one of these live streams, and we hope to have many more every Wednesday night around 8:45 p.m. Eastern or 9 p.m. Eastern. We're gonna go stay live for about an hour and a half, but all of that depends on all of you guys who are on the other side of the screen. So with that being said, we're gonna begin this live stream in 5 seconds. So welcome all to this Classical Theology live stream. My name is Jorge Gil. I am a friend, a colleague, and the co-host and producer of this show. And I'm not going to waste any more time, and I'm going to bring our own Dr. Brian Huffling here to the Classical Theology show and live stream. How you doing, brother?
Good, man. Good to be here.
Today, we just want to do a quick introduction, and I want you to tell everyone on the other side of the screen how this came about and why are you doing this and why we should be interested in learning more about classical theology, because all I hear when I go to things like ETS and EPS and all of these conferences and these little theology forums is that everybody should be neoclassical or everybody should be this and everybody should be that. Why are people still talking about classical theology today, especially the strand of classical theology that we're going to be discussing here? Why is it important, and why you decided to actually invest time, money, effort, resources into a channel called Classical Theology?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's funny you say it that way because I was at ETS, the Evangelical Theological Society and Evangelical Philosophical Society this past weekend. And the first speaker I saw was dissing theistic classical theism pretty hard. And the way I got into this was I got into it accidentally. So back when I started going to seminary, it was back in 2004. I didn't know anything about this stuff. I knew I wanted to learn more about why I believed in Christianity. I was a believer, but I wanted to know why and be able to defend it better. And in my first semester at Southern Evangelical Seminary, I learned very quickly from all my professors that if I was going to do well at apologetics, I was going to have to learn the philosophy to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, there were really only a couple schools to go to. It was us and Biola. And I joke around that we're kind of the East Coast apologetics and philosophy group, and Biola's the West Coast, because we're very different. So we are more classical at SES and more Thomistic, as you were kind of alluding to. And so I decided that my area of interest when I was getting into my doctoral work, I was looking at philosophy or maybe even biblical studies. I decided to do philosophy of religion again at SES because I thought that it was just important, and it was just an interest to me to be able to study God. I mean, how much more we talked about worship today in church this evening, and one of the ways I think we worship God is just by thinking about Him. So academics is not just some dry, boring thing that you do. To me, when I'm sitting around in this office reading a book or thinking about God for class, wherever, I get this sublime feeling of transcendence that I feel about God, and to me, that's worship. How much more could worship be besides contemplating the nature of God and His existence, trying to figure out what He's like and getting to know Him? And so, classical theology is typically branded with 4 attributes. We can get in all these as much as you want to. So, divine simplicity, divine immutability, divine eternality, and divine, did I say immutability?
Yeah.
Simplicity, impassibility, immutability, and eternality.
Let me say something. Let me say something about that, because those are the things that we hear today, especially in evangelical circles, and interestingly enough, mainly coming from Christian philosophers. Those are the things that are being attacked the most.
Right.
And for someone like me, who is an aspiring theologian, and I hope to be representing the classical theology posture properly, why is it that these 4 aspects of theology, the classical theology, are being attacked so fiercely? Because it is not something that goes unnoticed, right? These are things where there are channels online completely devoted to, let's say, show how illogical and incoherent simplicity is, right? So what do you think this is happening? And of course, we have mutual friends like Dolezal that does a good job at kind of pushing back on these criticisms, but this is just a handful of people that know about the work that he's put out there, and the vast majority of people are not well acquainted with this. So why do you think those attributes are attacked so constantly online?
Well, these 4 attributes, funny that they're being attacked now a lot, because they were foundational and bedrock and just Orthodox Christianity since the earliest times of the church, like with Irenaeus. And the reason that what people hold to those is they believe if God's not simple and immutable, eternal, then that's going to make Him more like a creature, and He needs to be explained in ways where His existence is self-existent, not based on something else. And I think that the reason they're being attacked is people sometimes legitimately, in their minds, just want to get to the truth, and they believe that classical theism is, as some will say, wildly implausible or incoherent. I've got a lot of people who are well known in evangelical theology and philosophy and apologetics who really attack this notion. Well, like Bill Craig, and no disrespect to Bill Craig, but he's very influential. And so when people follow him, and he says that, and people like him, not just him, but people like him who say that simplicity is incoherent, and they give example, Planting and different people give examples of why they think that simplicity or impassibility or whatever are wrong. Then a lot of people who they trust Bill, and he's very trustable. I mean, he's a great person, a great scholar. So a lot of people trust him like they would trust Geisler, for example, if Geisler says that we should believe in the classical view. And also they believe that it's not biblical, because they say, well, the biblical picture we get of God is not some static, unchanging, eternal being. It's a being who's in a give and take relationship with people. And they think that if impassibility and all these classical attributes are true, then we shouldn't have that kind of biblical portrait that we get of God. And so since we have that biblical picture, then those attributes must not be true.
What's the difference between this neoclassical or more analytical philosophy take on? I think you can describe it as more theistic personalism type of approach, versus the more Thomistic classical theology posture that we espouse in this channel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's see here. So you're asking. Rephrase your question. I got lost in the middle of it.
So for example, when we say Thomistic, right? We're not Thomists, but we're Thomistic in our theology, philosophy, approach, metaphysics.
Oh, what's the difference?
Yeah, what's the difference between that and someone who says, "Hey, I'm neoclassical. I'm more analytical in my philosophy. I'm a theistic personalist type of approach on my view of God." What would be the difference?
So first of all, there's different kinds of Thomists. So there are analytic Thomists, in the vein of, say, Eleanor Stump, those kind of folks. So you can be analytic in a sense. There's all kinds of different versions of Thomism. But the main distinctions between Thomism and, say, a generally speaking, an average analytic philosopher is our metaphysical position. Everything's going to boil down to our differences of opinion on metaphysics. So an analytic philosopher, which grew out of the shift from traditional philosophy into philosophy of language, trying to get away from metaphysics, trying to make everything scientific and reduce philosophy to language and math, will flatten out their metaphysics and their view of being. So analytic philosophy is basically analyzing statements for logical coherence. There's nothing wrong with that, as far as it goes. I mean, people were doing that back. Aristotle did that. Aristotle has books on philosophy of language. Aquinas did. Occam was heavy into that. There's nothing inherently wrong with being analytical in terms of looking at something in a logical way as a statement. But when you start to reduce that to you're getting away from metaphysics, and metaphysics is just our view of what we think reality is and what being is. So Peter Kraft wrote a good article. I heard this secondhand. I haven't read the article, but he said that when it made this big shift from traditional logic into symbolic logic, people they were seeing that people were not doing as well on standardized tests and couldn't do the analogy section as well, because they had everything such an analytic mindset. But some of the main differences are going to be, you mentioned the word theistic personalist. That's a term given by Brian Davies to people who were more neoclassical. So he would put Bill Craig in there, Richard Swinburne, Plantinga, a lot of folks in there. And that just means that we take God to be, quote unquote, a person. And you'll hear them describe God as a person. They don't mean to denigrate the Trinity in saying that, but they will describe God as a person. And as Ed Feser says in the book on classical theism, actually, he says that the problem isn't saying, it's not the word person, it's the word a. He's not a person like we are. So theistic personalism and neoclassical theism are going to make God more like a creature. Now, neoclassical theism is a view that's come out. And I asked Norm this one time, and because I think he got this from, what was his name? It's a book called The Concept of God, Ronald Nash. And Nash intimates this. He says there's basically two views of God: the Thomistic classical view in that regard, and more of a panentheist view. And the panentheist view there basically is saying that God in some way is composed of act and potency. So God either is pure act, like Aristotle and Aquinas say, or he's somehow got act and potency. So Aquinas, the classical view, and I realize not everybody who is classical or Thomistic. I mean, Anselm was said to be classical, Augustine, differently, Scotus are classical, but not Thomistic per se. So these two views of God, either God is pure act or he's act and potency in some regard, meaning he's got different kind of metaphysical parts. And so these neoclassical theologians want to take those kind of terms and say, yeah, like Bill does. They say, yeah, God is immutable in a way, but not absolutely. He's not simple. He's not timeless now. He was before or without creation.
Okay. So let me stop you there. She said,
all right.
Someone like Bill will say, and when we say Bill, we're referring to William Lane Craig.
Bill Craig, right?
So if somebody like Bill says that he's not simple, doesn't that require a
parts?
Yeah. So
together.
How is that detracting from the nature of God in your view, or is that something that you can actually get away with saying God is not simple?
Well, in my view, and in the classical tradition, which was pretty well held universally throughout the church until not long ago, was that God is simple, because if God has more fundamental parts than just his existence, he's somehow put together in some way. Now, Bill is fine holding on to a more social Trinitarian view where the persons really are seen as parts of the Trinity. But in a weird kind of way, Bill says that nothing is composed really of metaphysical parts. There are no, as he calls them, constituent parts. And so God's not really unique in that regard, but he does reject the view that God's essence and his existence are the same, that God doesn't have properties. And part of his reasoning for that is that, well, if we say God has or is knowledge, and God has or is power, well, knowledge and power are not the same things. How could those both be the same in God? So those are going to be kind of the objections. And of course, again, as I've already mentioned, doesn't think that's a biblical view of God, in saying that, and he doesn't change, he is not impacted by us, which is what impassibility is.
Well, it's interesting because one of the things that I've heard people who are against classical view of God is that that's not the way that the Bible presented it. The Bible says that God is this and God is that, and you cannot get divine simplicity out of the scriptures. How will you respond to something like that?
Yeah, no one that I have ever heard tries to get divine simplicity arrives at that from Scripture. What we believe is that there are two fountains of knowledge regarding God. There's the Bible, there's special revelation, and then there's general revelation. Even the Bible refers to general revelation. Look, see the Psalms saying that the heavens declare the handiwork of God. In Romans 1, Paul says that we can know about God's divine nature and eternal power through what has been made. Now, the Bible, if you just take a strict, very, very literal view of the Bible, it'll have God smelling the sacrifices, hearing the praises of his people, seeing what's going on, going down to Sodom as if he wasn't there already to see what was going on. He'll be a fortress. He'll have wings he covers us under. He'll get upset. He'll get jealous. He'll get angry. He'll change his mind. Jesus is a literal door. He's a literal vine. So what the classical theists will say about this, and this is just a traditional view, is to say that these are anthropomorphisms and anthropopathisms, saying that we're attributing human-like characteristics to God, when really the Bible was inspired by God, and it was written to humans secondarily by humans, and it's not meant to be a theology textbook or a philosophy of religion textbook. It's written for the shepherds of Israel. It's written for the kings of Israel, for this normal person. And so we understand that the Bible, like any other book, uses literal ways of describing things, narrative, poetry, figures of speech, allegory, hyperbole, and all that. So when it describes God, when people say, well, it says God changes, well, it also says God has wings and that he smells things. And we don't want to get this view of God where he's physical, like Clark, I was discussing this with my high schoolers at Apologia. This open theist view, which is a little bit even further, not much further in my view, but a little bit further down the road than neoclassical theism,
right?
Which I don't understand why it's even called neoclassical. There's nothing classical
about it. It's just neo
right.
something
they reject
new.
Every attribute
right.
of classical. So it's not neoclassical, it's just neo.
I guess they want to claim I guess it is an appeal to try to claim that there is some sort of tradition connecting the two.
I guess. Why not just call it something else? Because if you're going to reject every aspect, they reject simplicity, immutability in the strong sense. I know Bill holds to some kind of view of that. He doesn't use the term neoclassical. Ryan Mullins does with himself, who's a good proponent of that view. So he rejects simplicity and immutability and eternality and impassibility. So
it's almost like you want to be the new kids on the block and you want to, kind of come up with something novel and somehow we decided that, we're gonna tie it to what it was, but it's not what it used to be.
Right.
Yeah.
So if their view is right, if the neoclassical view is right, then classical theism is just wrong.
Right.
Again, it's not like we're taking classical theism and tweaking it just a little bit. You tweak it at all, it's not classical anymore.
So do you say that by adopting this new posture, you are in a sense saying that for almost 2,000 years, theologians have been absolutely wrong about God? Now, I do want to say that doesn't mean that just because we figured this out, maybe we figured this out now that couldn't be right. I don't want to fall into a fallacy where I'm saying, oh, just because this is modern, then it couldn't be right. No, because we also have other ideas that have been that they were kind of flushed out later on, thousands of years later, and we realized
it doesn't make it right or wrong if it's held. It's held for 2,000 years, but it makes it suspect to say that most theologians, philosophers were, holding to wildly incoherent views that are so dumb that, Bill is such a wonderful scholar. He's great. If I went and grabbed Time and Eternity off my shelf, the book is about God being, is he temporal or non-temporal?
Yeah.
Simplicity gets about a page out of that book. And he makes the objections, makes it look so ridiculous. I think because he thinks it is so ridiculous. I was gonna say something about that.
I had lunch with him that weekend when he was debating Eric Willenberg in morality, whether it was abstract or the Platonic realm. If it was granted a Platonic realm or in the nature of God, and I think. And during that lunch, of course, I'm not going to disclose the things that we discussed during that lunch, but there were several moments where it was not even a hint of how much he disliked the posture of simplicity, and just Thomistic classical theology posture. It was almost like, I remember producing a live stream with Frank Turek and him one time, and the whole Young Earth community came after us because Bill said that young earthers should just stop saying dumb things, and that it is one of the worst things that have ever happened to
I've seen that before,
Christianity. It was a clip bouncing around, and and the problem is that I asked the question because I was the person facilitating the questions.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I had a mutual friend of ours text me almost immediately. Dr. Juan Valdez texted me almost immediately, and he said, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Dude, I did nothing. That was all Bill, right?" Because we have our friend and mentor, Dr. Richard G. Howe, who is a young earther and is probably the biggest powerhouse in the philosophical evangelical Thomistic camp, right? So I would say that it is easy to note that these things are almost they see it as laughable, right. and I think that is an injustice to what's happened, but yeah, and I lost my train of thought. So
you were asking about if it was held for 2,000 years,
right?
It should give us pause to, if we think something is so ridiculous as those four doctrines, especially, we should at least wonder, well, and there were so many brilliant minds throughout the church, and still are, who hold these positions. This is still not an outlandish position. There are a lot of Christians hold to classical theism. I said when I went to ETS this past weekend, I was surprised by how many people were talking about these debates about classical theism versus neoclassical theism, or however they were phrased. But there were a lot of people on both sides of this debate. So, and a lot of Christians, and the Catholic position is more standardly classical. There's a lot of Catholic Christians, a lot of especially Reformed Christians in the Baptist circles and in the scholastic circles, in the Reformed camps, who are still very classical. So it's not like everyone today rejects it. It's been held to for the whole age of the church, really. Even now, there's just some big groups who are rejecting it.
Yeah. By the way, just as a side note, I heard that you stay at the best Airbnb here in Atlanta.
I did, man. That was a good place. Yeah.
So I just wanna let you know that this is a sponsor of this show, La Casa del Jorge. It's a sponsor of this live stream. But all jokes aside, man, one of the things that I know, and I understand a little bit of how this whole thing works, and that's one of the reasons why I'm blessed to be able to sit at your feet and learn and kind of discuss these topics, especially directly with you and with the people in the audience. So one of the things that I understand is that for the classical theologians still hold to the idea that things have natures, right? While the other side, I don't know how they call them. Maybe they call them universals. Maybe it's just a nominal way of describing something. For those who don't know this, how would you go about explaining the difference between, for example, the classical theologian that holds to metaphysical reality where natures exist, and those of a more modern persuasion that would say, hey, that doesn't exist. There is no such thing as it's just a nature. Just the way that they would describe something, they have these commonalities. It's just a description that we give them with these universals that everyone in this species has that. How would you go about that?
Yeah, and that's another characteristic of the more analytical movement, is that that if things are really boiled down to language, then you're going to have more what you're describing as nominalism, which is the rejection of essences. Now, there's a little bit of a distinction between nominalism and conceptualism. So, for example, William Ockham is seen as one of the main proponents of nominalism. Probably was more of a conceptualist, because he did hold to universals. The difference is that one of the biggest debates in philosophy ever since at least Plato is whether or not essences exist. Mm-hmm. By that I mean, we would say, as if you believe that there are essences, and we'll just say universals to make the point a little bit more easy to grasp. Mm-hmm. If you believe that there is as an objective human nature that we all share, like that Jesus took on to be our atonement, then you're a realist. That in this context, you're a realist. You believe in objective human essences, in the sense that we all have something that we share. Okay. If you deny that and say, no, we don't share anything like a human essence per se, well, but we just look alike. We have certain things in common. We're in the same class of beings. There's different kinds of nominalists. You're a nominalist in that regard. So, and that debate, which in my opinion and what I've heard throughout my philosophical career, is that is the most hotly debated and most important debates that there is in philosophy. I mean, not are there just like Plato, not are there forms out there that exist in form land, but is there something about cats and trees and humans that they have in common with other members of their species that they share, like an essence, like a cat essence or some kind of a tree nature kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you say yes, then you're not just your philosophical theology, your ethics, your political, everything, your moral philosophy, everything is going to go in a certain direction. If you say no, you're going to go in another direction. Because if you hold to a natural, these kind of essences particularly, a lot of times you're going to end up being natural law theorists, as opposed to, say, divine command theorists would say that ethics and morality are based solely on God's commands. And so those play into part. And then the question arises, well, does God have a nature? This is the famous question that Plantinga asked back in 1980, I think it was the year I was born. So I remember February, I believe it was, with Plantinga. And the question is,
he is old, and you are old too. So
yeah, but he's older.
He's older.
Yeah. He's older.
And I am not. You can see I'm still a young stud. So just let people know.
Right. That's right. So yeah, your view of natures and all that will play certainly into your philosophical theology in general, and just your overall philosophical metaphysical system as well.
So you were talking about when we look at things like simplicity and impassibility, and a lot of the claim that the neo-classical or the theistic personalists, or however you want, whatever label, it's used to describe the new wave of theology that is not, in contrast with classical theology,
mm-hmm.
right? That you were talking about when we look at these things, and God is described with human attributes or doing human things, and we understand that when we talk about God, especially within the Thomistic tradition, we talk about God in an analogical way, correct? Is that the way to say it?
Yeah.
Is that in contrast to maybe them looking at some of these things in a more univocal way? Is that correct?
Exactly. Yes. Another characteristic between, say, the classical view and then the analytic view, which is that there's basically three ways. There's different ways to subcategorize this.
Okay.
Of how our language applies to God, or anything for that matter. So our language can apply to God univocally, analogically, or equivocally. If I say a word applies to two different things in the exact same way, it's univocal. Think of one, like universe or uniform. So if I say I'm good and my phone is good, I mean the same thing. Equivocally means they have radically different meanings. If I say I'm going to go fishing on the riverbank and I'm going to go to the bank to make a deposit, the word bank there's nothing in common. They're equivocal. A term that's analogical will mean that there's something they have in common, but it's a little bit different. So if I say, again, I'm good and my phone is good, okay, mm-hmm. Then there's a sense in which there's something that there's the same, but there's another sense in which they're different. That's how they're analogical. So the same is that, well, to be a good X means you've got an X, and whatever it is, it's a good example of what it means to be that. So if I have a good phone, a good phone isn't going to have a screen that's shattered. I don't shatter my screen anytime soon, or doesn't work well, right? So, and good glasses, same thing. Good glasses help you see better.
Right.
So to
or
be
a good knife is
the
one that has a sharp blade.
Yeah, whatever it's supposed to do, right?
Right.
Your hat, a famous cult hat, is a good hat.
Yeah, well, Cult is going to be sponsoring this show in the very near future, so
I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I can't wait to see it. So whatever a thing is, it's good if it does what it's supposed to do, or if it is a good example of what it's supposed to be. So, but when I take the word good, for example, and I say, okay, my glasses are good, my desk is good, my microphone is good, my whatever, my food, my car, that doesn't mean the same thing, right? So what makes a microphone good is not at all what makes glasses good, or what makes pizza good, or what makes a car good. Well, if the nature of goodness differs among things that's just on my desk here, how much more is it going to be the case that when I say an angel is good, which is an immaterial, finite being, when I say the angel is good, how much different is it going to mean there? And then how much more when I say God is good? Because God isn't even he's immaterial, but he's not even a finite being. He's a creator. He's necessary. He's infinite. So we take these words and apply them to God. When classical theists do that, we want to maintain this crisp creator-creature distinction. And it says, when I refer to myself as good, or your hat or my car, that you can't take that exact same definition and apply it to God in the same way. Now, I will say there are some classical theists who do. So if you want to take Scotus, for example, Scotus will do that. Scotus believed that if we didn't have a univocal definition in mind, then we don't know what we're talking about. And that's one of Bill Craig's gripes about the analogical view. Well, if we take a term and say, well, I don't really know what it means to say God is good. What I mean by it, I know what I mean by it, but I don't know what it is in and of itself completely.
Fully, yeah.
Because when I say,
even I can grasp that, and it doesn't rub me the wrong way. I think that there are some presuppositions there that have to be in place in order for you to feel some type of way about it. And I understand that. Me, I don't have letters before or after my name, in terms of education like you do or Bill does. But once you're so invested in something like that, you tend to become a bit more zealous about the posture that you've been holding for longer than I've been alive. So I figure that that's going to create a little bit of noise if other postures are competing, and you're
sure,
and he rose to prominence for his philosophical work, but what popularized him was his debating, right? His skills.
Oh yeah, and he's great at it. He's great at it.
Yeah. I do want to move on to another question. I think this one is very important for us to address. And this is, how does the classical view of God in classical theism shape the way we understand God's relationship to time? And you alluded to that already. Creation and change. And before you go and dive deep into this, because I'm sure that you have plenty to say, explain to us, what change in the Thomistic sense entails.
Yeah, so great question. And it's called the problem of change in philosophy because it's hard sometimes to understand what's going on with a change. Like, what does it mean? What counts for as a change? There's different kinds of change. So, but basically, something changes if it goes from being in one state to another through some kind of a process. Like, so I take something and it's in a beginning original state, and it undergoes some kind of process, and then there's an end state where it's different, right? So that's the basic idea of what a change is. And a change is going from actually existing with certain potentiality, certain power, certain ability. Like we can both stand up. We don't have to be anything complicated. We have the potential, the power to stand up or to go downstairs and get something to eat if we want to. You're already downstairs. Right. So that's all that changes. Is something that's already existing that undergoes some kind of a process and becomes something at least somewhat different. All right. So that would raise the question, well, then, was the beginning of the universe a change? And in the classical view, no, because nothing remained the same. There was the creation of something new. Nothing was the same. People say, well, God's relationship was the same. No, God's existence was completely separate from the universe. The universe didn't change from going from one thing to something else. It just began to exist. All right. And so change in this way of talking, and traditionally, going back to Aristotle and lots of people who follow him, would say that change, or time rather, time is really nothing more than the measurement of change. So if I went and grabbed a tape recorder, a tape measure over there, I pull it out and I could measure, say, how long my computer is, how wide it is, right? Or how long in the diagonal measurement, how big the screen is. It might say 16 inches for this computer. Well, there's no such thing as 16 inches in itself. It's measuring 16 inches of something. All right, an inch doesn't exist in and of itself. So today is Wednesday. Wednesday doesn't exist. This is the name we've given to this kind of period of time where we happen to have a 7-day calendar, and it follows the rotation of the earth and revolution around the sun and all that. But time, in this view, is not an existing thing. When you talk to a physicist, they may say time exists as a certain kind of dimension, and we disagree on some of what these things mean and look like and how we define all this kind of stuff. This even came up again in my ETS conference this past weekend. Different views of time. So you got views of time where you've got a before and an after, a past, present, and future, which is called the A theory, or the tensed time. Mm-hmm. You got B theory, which is more of an Einsteinian view of time, where everything is pretty well static. There is no before, there's no past, present, and future, where you've got tensed moments changing. You've got a timeline where everything's on that line, and you've got some things before something else. Okay, so time then relates to creation in terms of how things are changing. So we've been talking now for, it's 9:27. We've been talking since about 8:45. We've had about 27 plus 42 minutes of change happen, basically. Things where if I move from here to there, there's a certain amount of change takes place. Well, that time measures that change. Okay. So how does God fit into that, you ask? Well,
so the question was, how does the classical view of God shape the way we understand God's relationship to time, creation, and change? Yeah.
So the traditional views of God, even going before Christianity to Plato, you can make an argument that this was the Hebraic view of God too, even though the Bible never says, to their point, it never uses the term eternal in a philosophical sense, in the sense of being completely timeless. The Bible uses the word more for everlasting. It does not use it doesn't have a philosophical nature of time involved. Like I said, the Bible is not a philosophy book or a theology textbook. So traditionally, if God has said not to change, because for something to be changed in the traditional view means that something else affected it. Well, to be affected by something is to be passive to something else's power. This is why Augustine said that the soul is not changed by the body. So when you stump your toe on something, your body is not telling your soul, "Ow, that hurt." Your soul is telling your body, "Hey, you're in pain," because the soul cannot be affected by that. Because if something has power to change you, it's got power over you in some regard to affect you. Now, I don't hold Augustine's view of the soul there, but this notion of God not changing, because he would be composed of parts, he would be affected by things other than himself, would show that if God is not changing, then he's not measured by that any kind of change or time. So he's timeless. So that going back to the classical understanding of time in this regard would be Boethius, which he wrote on the Constellation of Philosophy, where he says that God enjoys all of his life all at once. So I'm 45. Sometimes I miss being 12. I've got a 14-year-old, a 5-year-old. I miss sometimes those ages, or I miss them being at certain ages. My son's birthday soon. I'm going to miss him being younger than he was. Both of them are going to have birthdays, and we're going to miss one day, you being 5 or you being 14. God doesn't miss anything. He has all of his life all at once.
My wife says that I still act like a 5-year-old, so she doesn't miss that. Yeah.
Yeah, she doesn't miss that. Yeah, we both have childish tendencies, like to play around and have fun. But God doesn't miss anything. He has all of his life all at once. And so if that's the case, he's not changing, he's not measured by time in that regard.
All right, so we're going deep into the just the rabbit hole of classical theology. So at the core, so then again, simple, immutable, eternal. Uh, again, we talk about divine simplicity and how people struggle and with it, and how people, um, I would say, how people criticize it. And one of the things that I understand is that even one of the things that helped me understand that was, in the same way that we look at the light spectrum, and light goes into a prism and goes in and is all, white light, or, date light, or light, and when it comes out on the other prism, it's the same exact light. The way it's refracted, it allows us to see all the colors of the spectrum, that's right. And it's the same light. So on one side we got the light, the other side we have all these different, hues. And this is what we'll say, well, criticism is, God's love and justice is the same, right? They're the same, right?
Right.
In the sense that, before you hit the prism, you will look at it and it's the same, right? But on our end, we can only perceive the difference by the refraction from the prism, right? So I don't know if I'm just butchering the whole thing.
No, that's good. So like creation is just various ways of God can show his goodness.
Right.
And we pick out these things. We pick out God's love, God's mercy, but those things are to us different, but in God, it's all picking out the divine essence.
Right. Because I'm a very visual learner, and I like to understand things this way. It makes it so much more digestible to me. And then again, I don't have any issues once somebody presented to me that way. Maybe I'm too simple. You see what I did there?
Simple. Yeah, I see that. Yeah, that was good.
Anyways, so the other, I want to see if we can bridge some of these concerns. People say, well, you're Thomistic and you're going to become a Catholic if you do that. Because a lot of the guys, that hold to classical theology or classical theism, however you want to call it, or or Thomistic metaphysics, then before you know it, you're going to be kissing the Pope's ring, right? Or I mean, this is a thing that has been floating out there for a while. We want to spell these things here at the Classical Theology Show. And so I know that some of our brothers in the evangelical world worry that classical theology makes God feel distant or impersonal. How
following the general principle of that it's held to. And he wasn't the only one, of course. He's the one that we tend to gravitate toward because of his metaphysical system. This is why I stopped years ago saying I'm a Thomist per se, like you said earlier, but I'm Thomistic. And so there's two ways we can know about God. One is through the Bible, special revelation, and the other is through creation. Okay. So when it comes to knowing God through the Bible, and it's specifically about salvation and sin and the nature of the church, last things, wholeheartedly evangelical Protestant. But there's some things we can agree on when it comes to general revelation. And even non-Christians agree with this. So you got Islamic philosophers, you've got Jewish philosophers who will hold that God is a timeless, simple being. So when it comes to being Thomistic, I'm more Thomistic when it comes to things about knowing God through nature and creation, and not as much when it comes to issues that are specifically biblical about salvation and whatnot. Now, I don't think there's anything, Norman used to say this a lot, he used to write about this, if you become Thomistic, are you going to necessarily become a Catholic? No. There's nothing about holding these specifically views about general revelation and metaphysics that lead to a specific reading of the Bible. You can hold that God is and it's even broader than God. It has to do with the nature of man and knowledge and all that stuff as well. But when talking about theology proper, saying God is simple, saying God is eternal, saying God is impassible and immutable, they're not inherently Catholic. I mean, Protestants have always held these things about God having these classical attributes. There's nothing about that leads to, crossing the Tiber, as it were, to becoming Catholic. You can be a Protestant and hold those positions and hold the general metaphysical positions that Aquinas held to. And by the way, he held them from Aristotle. He wasn't a pagan Greek. He was able to take certain things from Aristotle and take the good stuff and leave the bad stuff, like Augustine did. A lot of people who like to criticize us for being Thomistic hold to Augustine, and Augustine was very Platonic. He held to Plato. Well, he said once he retracted some of the other things, he said you take what is good in Platonism and you leave the rest. Well, there's nothing inherently like we can hold to certain Aristotelian views or Platonic views and not be quote unquote pagan. You can hold to certain views about that Aquinas held to. They're also very Aristotelian, and not be Catholic. There's just nothing inherently necessary that leads us from classical theism to Catholicism. I mean, to be a Catholic means that you have a certain view of the Pope and Mary and the sacraments and scriptures that natural theology doesn't lead you to in a necessary way, just because you hold to an act potency distinction. Now, when it comes to God being, this is another view. We get this from the Open Theist too. That, well, you guys believe in a static, unchanging, impersonal, unaffected kind of God. Well, not really, because our view of God being pure act is that he is infinitely active. He's infinitely engaged in our lives. And a lot of people hold it to what I call a practical deism, that says that when God creates us and we're existing now, we're living our lives, God's kind of sitting back and just kind of watching what's going on. And their criticism is that our God is static and not involved. The Thomistic view is that God is actively involved in causing us at every single moment of our being, which is both amazing and it's beautiful from a gospel point of view. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, let me say something about, because my next point was going to be, how does classical theism actually deepen our understanding of a personal God rather than diminish it? And the oh so famous analogy of the band and the music, and when the band stop playing, the music goes away. In a sense, God is that band that it is sustaining us into existence in every moment. It's not that he is not like he's sitting in his throne, stroking his white beard and just not having to do anything with us. He is constantly, sustaining each one of us and the whole of reality into existence, because he is the prime reality. This is one of the things that I hope I'm getting it right, because I don't want to. I know that I have this incredible respect for this idea that those who are teachers are going to be held accountable to a higher degree. And no, I understand that God is the prime reality, and I understand that because He is a spirit, the spiritual world is even, we could say, and again, this is language limitations or maybe my own understanding, that this whole immaterial unseen realm is even more real than the three-dimensional physical realm that we live in, since it's closer to the nature of God, and that we actually, as human beings, I think this is one of the reasons why angels angels are, I will say, at an intellectual higher level, because they don't have the limitation of a brain, right? Even though our mind is immaterial, this is still correlated to our bodies, our brains, right? So when we grasp the concept of God being the source and sustainer of our existence, which is what classical theism teaches, should get us closer to this personal God that says that you are the apple of His eye.
Yeah. I mean, I think it does have a much more intimate view. So back in 2019, a philosopher from California, wrote in a New York opinion piece that God cannot be both good and all-knowing, because if he's all good, he cannot know what it's like to lust. If he's all-knowing, he knows what it's like to lust and can't be all good. That just assumes that God knows things the way you and I do. Now, a lot of these discussions and debates about what is God like and how does he do this, that, and the other assumes he does it just like we do, right? But that means that God has this kind of experiential, passive knowing, where if God knows that you're doing something because he's kind of watching you out there doing it. And the view that I'm espousing, God doesn't look out there, as it were, and know what you're doing. He's causing you to exist every single moment. So he doesn't look beyond himself. He just has to know himself as the cause of all his effects. And so that's a much more intimate understanding of knowledge that God has than this kind of view that God's kind of a person like us looking out there, as it were, basically.
That is mind-blowing. Yeah.
It is, flows, and even goes further.
Because it flows, existence is flowing out of him, right, in a sense. So he's not like participating and seeing what you're doing. He's actually
we participate in him. It's the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. But even though he's not causing us to do what we do, in a sense, he is a cause of us. So I think that you need to explain that as well, because when you say something like that, you're gonna get accused of God being now the author of evil or is causing you to sin. But maybe we can even leave that for the next episode, or maybe we can touch on the Q&A, because we have actually a question here in the chat. But in order for us to go there, we will have to do a little bit more of contextualizing the classical theistic.
Let me say one more thing, though, because it's a beautiful piece, part of in my opinion. So when we realize that God is upholding us every moment, not just like you said, sitting back, stroking his beard, seeing what we're doing, like we watch our kids and all this kind of stuff in that way, he is actively upholding us. And all the good that we do comes from his goodness. And even when we sin, and this is such a beautiful picture to me, that we sin, God is keeping us in existence, upholding us, even when we are actively spitting in his face, actively living in rebellion against him. He's keeping us in existence. He's the one who is sustaining us and loves us and is trying to, and wants us to come back to him. So this is, again, just an amazing, he didn't have to do that. He could just, snap his fingers. I can't snap very well now. Or just let go of us. And you're going to do it? Yeah, you're going to show me up? Yeah. And it's just, to me, it's just a beautiful picture of his love. For a while we are still, in active rebellion against him, he still is upholding us in our existence. Yeah. And loving us.
So again, we can go really deep. In order to contextualize this properly, I think we also have to talk about the right now the modern philosophical and I will say materialistic scientific a way of thinking. We have lost the different or the framework for causes like, Aristotelian causes. Yeah. Can you break them down for me? Because
material, which is the thing out of which something is made. So if I have this, basically a little red ball here. The stuff, this is an obsidian, so it's made of whatever obsidian. That's the material cause. The formal cause is just the spherical ball, or we had the
material
cause of a human.
Formal cause.
Formal. The efficient is the ultimate cause that brings it into existence.
Right. Okay.
And the final cause is, in this case, what it's for. So for me, it's decoration for
decoration.
What we're going to be doing tomorrow on the Mysterian File show, which is supposed to be something spooky looking for that kind of stuff. So it's material, formal, efficient, and final.
Okay. So for example, the Formal cause, if I were to use the analogy of a house, will be the blueprints, right?
Yes,
The material cause will be, the concrete and the nails and the wood, right? The what is the another one? So material, formal, efficient.
So
cause
efficient would be the builders who are
the
making
Mexicans that you hire, right, to build it, And I can say that. Okay, don't worry about it.
You can get away with that, yeah.
Yeah. So you're talking about Jose, Julio, and Luis, right? So they are the efficient cause, and then the final cause. It would be for me and my family to live here.
Yeah, shelter. Right.
Yeah, shelter. Mm-hmm. So
and then modern science now basically goes with
just material and
maybe efficient.
Efficient.
The
I don't think
and
that
final
formal and
really
final
involved.
are not there. So that's what's so mechanistic, right? And,
right?
And we lose so much richness when we think about these things. Okay, so we're just coming up on the hour, so we want to open up for questions. Anybody on the other side of the screen, just go ahead on and leave your questions in the chat section. We'll try to get to them ASAP. I have two more questions here related to these, and this has more of a practical and a spiritual relevance to the conversation. Next question will be, how should recovering classical theology affect the way the average Christian prays, worships, and reads scripture? Let me ask it again, because we want to be able to be practical here at the Classical Theology Show. We don't want to just be throwing all that information out there, and there's nothing that you're going to do with this just to either inflate your ego or like me, the more I hear about this, the dumber I feel, because I realize I don't know enough, right?
That's how I
don't
feel
know
too.
as much. Right. But I want this to be practical for the listener as well, because we want to give them tools to equip them to be able to, have a more robust spiritual life and a more practical, I will say, Christian life. So how should recovering classical theology affect the way the average Christian prays, worships, and reads the scripture?
Well, I think in one regard, we mentioned this again in church tonight, we discussed worship. So one is this: we have a better understanding of what we're trying to worship. There is a danger, though, and I've seen this in my family. I've seen it firsthand. If we think that God is a genie and we can affect God in certain ways, I used to be in the Word Faith movement.
I did.
A lot of people, huh?
I did not know that.
You knew that. You knew that. You forgot.
Okay, maybe I forgot. Yeah, I try not to think about you a lot. So.
Well, if we think that God, changes and we can affect him, or if he's, same thing with the problem of evil, if we think that God wants us to be completely happy and everything going well, the first time it doesn't happen, it wrecks our faith. Right? So if we take God, we have a wrong view of God, we have wrong expectations, it can have a literal, practical, detrimental view of our faith and relationship with him. It also can give us confidence, though, because I would not want to think that God can just change at the whim of 8 billion people. If 8 billion people right now are causing God to feel differently or think, that's scary. I'd like knowing, this is not what motivates my position, but I take comfort that God is not changed by his little ant creations, right? I'm referring to humans now, right? So God's bigger than that, he's better than that. So we're safe in that God, unlike a law and other views of God, he's not just going to up and change his view and not know what to expect. God is eternally and unchangeably and simply willing what he says he's going to do and will. So we're safe. We know what to expect in some regards. We're not worried about him, as the open theists do, not knowing what's going to happen and literally taking risks. I taught this today in my class on apologetics to my high schoolers at Apologia. God doesn't take risks like the open theists think. God is completely sovereign and in control and in charge. So am I getting at the question, though, what you wanted me to say? I'm not sure if I'm getting at that or not. Okay.
Yeah, I do have last one here, and I think that after that I'll grab the one that it's in the chat. And I think is Adam. I think is all channel for Adam. Okay. So if someone listening wanted to begin exploring classical theology or Thomistic theology or classical theism, where would you recommend they start?
That's a great question. A couple books I kind of go to. It depends if you just want a general view of classical theology. I like Brian Davies' Intro to Philosophy of Religion. Fourth edition is his newest one, where he explains the differences between what he calls theistic personalism and the classical view. It's very good. For simplicity in particular, I like Dolezal's book, God Without Parts. Also has one, All That Is in God.
All That Is in God, yeah.
That's very good. Ed Fazer has a lot of really good stuff out there. It's a beginner's guide to Aquinas. His book on the last superstition.
Yeah, the Belinda guide. Actually, I listen to that one at least once a year because I'm not smart enough to retain.
Which one is that?
The little Belinda guide to Aquinas.
Oh, Aquinas. Yeah. His book, The Last Superstition, is meant really to be an apologetic against the new atheists. But it's a really good introduction to philosophy and classical theism as well.
Yeah, she says that Richard Dawkins don't know the difference between metaphysics and metamucil. It's really good.
That's
He's
right.
a witty writer. Yeah.
Shameless plug. I have all that on my own website, brianhuffling.com.
Well, that is actually what is right there under your name, classicaltheology.com. I think that's what everybody should. Yeah, everybody should go there. They're watching. If you guys want to learn more about this, and just like the banner says at the bottom, if you want to support this channel, just make sure you share this live stream and you subscribe to this channel, because we are planning on doing this every week at the same time. Maybe we move it up to 9 to be able to start right on the hour. But as you can see, we're willing to go for an hour and 30 minutes and try to serve you guys as much as possible. This is something that I thoroughly enjoy. I know that I learn a lot. It's almost like, I am at a ses.edu class, but I get to interact with the professor for an hour, like I'm the teacher's pet right here. But I don't know if you have any other comments or questions or insights before we move on to the question on the screen.
I'll just say, thanks for tuning in. And I think it's a really important question. And Norm Geiser used to say the most important question you can ask is about, does God exist and what's he like, basically, because how you answer that, even if you think he exists, we have different views of what he's like, will change your views of everything, of ethics and politics. So our views of God are the most important views we're going to have. And what other more important questions are there than, is God real and what's he like?
Yeah.
So
actually, it was interesting because I was in a conversation with Lee Strobel not long ago. I'm talking about maybe a month ago, maybe a month and a half ago. And one of the things that we were discussing was that his publisher asked him to write a book. They approached him. He says, well, you're a best-selling writer, author. We want you to write something, but we want you to write something based on internet search data.
Oh, wow.
And this is the number one question that they were looking into. It was, is God real?
Wow.
Which is a variation of, does God exist?
Right.
So that was one of the highest ranked queries on the internet. So they approached him and he says, hey, can you do one of yours?
That's cool. That's very interesting. That's been the number one question forever.
Yeah. And, now we have data to back it up. And, and I know a guy that knows a guy. So, I get to be in this insider conversations, and that was very, very interesting. And there's look at that. I got a viewer here that knows my secret name, Mano Negra. Here is the. I'm sorry, I came to ruin your channel, Brian. So I'm bringing all the bad actors here on your chat. But no,
I love it, man.
That's how they. That's how they know me out there in the interwebs. Okay.
Cool.
But yeah. So let me ask this question. All right. So I'm gonna do a few things here, and then we're gonna go and let me see if I can turn. Let me see. Is it this one? Making sure. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is bring in the question.
Okay.
And the question is, how does God know future free events in advance? And go ahead and start writing down each one of these or thinking each one of the words used, because it seems that the question is written in a way that presupposes a posture or a view, like most questions, right?
All right.
So how does God know future free events? And what do you mean by free also, right? If it's libertarian free will, which is more of like autonomous. We were talking about that the other day when you were here last week, right?
Yeah, you were.
Autonomous, almost, what do you call it? It was almost like an anarchy view of like, you're just kind of your own person, which,
you're your own. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Anyways, free events in advance. And here in advance, we're looking at this smuggling the idea of, time, like
yes,
in advance, like, okay, how God knows in advance is almost like he's got to travel in time to see things happen, and don't have this eternal moment in front of him because there's no, potentiality. He's pure act, right? If they haven't happened yet, and I mean, it presupposes the A theory of time, right? Mm-hmm. So how would you answer that? And then again, I kind of, I'm really good at breaking things down. I'm not as good as giving a better explanation of what I break down, right? But that's why we have you here.
All right. So the question assumes that God's already in time. When you ask, how does God know the future? Well, if God is eternal, and by eternal I mean timeless, he doesn't have a future. I have a future. So you can ask the question, how does God know my future? But if God's eternal, then there's nothing beyond that for him. He just is an eternal, changeless being. I have a future. But how does he know that? Because as I mentioned before, God doesn't know things by looking outwardly. God knows all things because he's the cause of all things that are happening. And so God knows all things that are going to happen to us.
Whoa. Break down that, because the accused, I already hear them, Did you see what he said? He said that God does everything that's happening, and that means that God is the author of sin, and there's no difference from, that 5-point deterministic Calvinism that, we really don't like. And, I mean, I like R.C. Sproul, but the rest of the Calvinists, I don't like them. Right. So you have to be mindful of that. Right. So explain that.
So when I say that God causes all things or knows all things by knowing himself as the cause, I mean that he's not passively learning things by looking out there. All right. He is the cause of all effects that are happening, which would be us. And Aquinas did hold to a very high level of sovereignty. There are debates about what he held to regarding free will. I think it's pretty clear he was a compatibilist. There are those like Eleanor Stump who think he's held to libertarian free will. I don't think he held to libertarian free will. So I think he was a compatibilist, meaning that there's no contradiction between God willing something and willing me to do it, and then me doing it freely. So if I grab my little lens wipe here for my glasses, if God says, I want Brian to pick up that lens rag, and I look at that lens rag, I want to pick that up. And so I did it freely. I wasn't made to do it. I wasn't forced to do it. But God had a causal activity in that libertarians want to reject. Yeah. Now we don't charge God with the being the cause of evil.
Why?
Because
why? That's it. So say it slowly. Why?
All right. So the notion of evil that Aquinas held to was that of Augustine, and evil is not a thing. Evil is when you have something that's good and that's been corrupted. So God doesn't create corrupted things. God created good things that ended up corrupting things. So there is secondary causality going on in this discussion.
That's exactly what we needed to get. Yes.
Yeah, the secondary causality would be us as humans doing things from our own, I'll use the term free will, but not in a libertarian sense. That we're doing what we want to do. Like I want to grab that rag, I just grabbed it. Okay, I'm not being forced to grab it, but I'm grabbing it of my own volition. But what I do of my volition also is affected by God's causality as well.
Let me say something that it helped me help others understand. And I mean, again, it might be simplistic, it might be very naive to the level of thinking that you do in philosophical matters. But for example, my son, I'm the cause of my son. But
right.
If my son do something stupid that land him in jail, I'm not the cause of that, even though I was the cause of him. Right?
Yeah, you're not blameworthy for the action.
Right. I'm not blameworthy. There you go. I've never heard that before. So yeah, I'm not blameworthy, even though I'm in a sense the cause of my son. Right. Yeah. Because, if you haven't heard about the birds and the bees, that's for another live stream. But in a sense, I'm the cause of my son. Right. But if he grows up to be a thief, I'm not the cause. I'm not blameworthy for his sinful and delictive acts committed,
Right.
by
so,
him.
So somebody in the Thomistic camp, if you want to stay in that Thomistic discussion, would say if compatibilism is true, and that's what seems to be what Aquinas' view was, is that God causes us to want certain things, basically. So we have certain things that we do that ultimately goes back to God's efficient causality, but we also maintain a secondary causality because we're free in the sense that we're not being forced to do so. That's why we're blameworthy or praiseworthy based on what we do. But then we do get in this discussion of, like Romans 9, are there certain things that have been created for God's glory and some things created for God's wrath? How does that mix with predestination and all that? Of course, that might be, if you want, on another live stream as well. But the answer to the question being asked is there's nothing future for God. And so the freedom that we have is based in the nature that God gave us in terms of being free agents, but tied to his own causality. So it sounds like the question wants to maintain how can we be in a libertarianly free and God know what's going on. And my view is that we're not libertarianly free, if I can say it that way.
Good deal.
Because I have no problem saying that God ordains things and that he also ordains us to freely act according to his will.
All right. Chosen but Free, Norman Geisler, as a book that you could read. Chosen but Free, right? And hopefully people here on the stream right now are going to share this. We're going to be actually pulling out clips from this conversation out into the open to make sure that more people get to watch what we're doing and looking toward the future. Brian, what role do you see classical theology? Yeah, our future. There you go. Thank you for fixing that. Looking toward our future, what role do you see classical theology playing in the next generation of evangelical leadership?
I think that you mean the channel or the notion of
No,
classical
I'm talking
theology?
about in general
Okay.
the notion of classical
Oh,
theology
okay.
for the
Okay.
new generation of scholars, leaders, pastors, teachers.
Yeah, I'm hoping that we can, it will do what it has already done, and that is to maintain a strict creator creature distinction and to give us a right view of God. And so that we will see his sovereignty. We can answer these questions. I mean, it's not just a matter of us having right views about God. It also answers questions like when the guy said, well, God can't be good and all knowing. That's because he has a very unclassical view of what it means to be God. That God basically is this kind of a Cartesian person, as it were, meaning he's just this mind that knows things and performs the way that we do. Well, if you assume he's already passive in how he knows things and what it means to know things experientially, then you're going to have a lot of problems. But I have a blog article on my website that's called "The Problems Thomists Don't Have." And
Uh
so
huh.
classical theology can answer a lot of these problems and a lot of these questions that people have, like how does the soul and the body relate to each other?
Right.
I've got a journal by a professional evangelical theological society. It's ETS.
Hylomorphism.
Actually,
Woohoo!
yeah, I think it's ETS. It says if you believe in a soul and a body, you're a substance dualist. Well, a lot of people are, but you don't have to be.
You don't have
You
to
can
be.
hold to
Yeah,
a
it is
hylomorphic
very.
view, and it
It's,
solves more problems.
yeah. It is. It is really interesting because that is the one thing that I fell in love with as soon as I started my journey at ses.edu. If you want a great education, go to ses.edu. And it was the long conversations I got to have with Dr. Richard G. Howe about hylomorphism. And I fell
Mm-hmm.
in love with that concept to the point where actually that's my gamer tag. I have merch with that name on. I have built a whole brand around it because I understand that it's actually the whole idea of Cartesian dualism and what is called the interaction problem and all of these
Right.
other things don't exist, didn't exist until somebody made it up. And I think that, yeah, the neoclassical view, it's in the same vein where it creates more problems than it solves. Now, it might sound a little fancier, right? But it does create more issues than it solves. So, I believe that classical theology is coming back full force, right? And I think that the next generation are really, and actually, you don't know this, but in Latin America, we don't have the problem. I mean, we don't have the problem of, there's a few guys like our beloved Alan, right, who would still worship at the altar of the,
Hey, Alan.
William Lane Craig type of, whatever he says, goes because he's almost like God's mouthpiece when it comes to philosophy and theology. But it is a very, very few and far in between. Most people in Latin
Yeah, I didn't know
America,
that.
most people in Latin America, I believe, because of the influence of the Catholic Church,
I was going
are
to ask that.
Thomistic.
Yeah.
Yeah, are
Right.
Thomistic in their theology, so we don't suffer from those. Now
That's
they are,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, they are very uneducated. I'm not going to say that they're brilliant in the way that they parse out the scriptures and they look at the metaphysics, but at least they don't stumble with new ways to try to redefine theology the way that some of our counterparts
Yeah.
here in the
Right.
states
Right. Right.
and
Yeah.
in
That's
the
interesting.
higher academia do. So with that being said, man, I don't know if you why don't you take us to the end of the episode today, man, and give me and the audience your honest assessment of how you felt in this first episode of the Classical Theology Show, man.
Well, I really appreciate you in this. I've known you for going on about 8 years now, and I met you at a advanced CIA conference, wanting to learn more about how to make my website better
Right.
and how to do media type stuff. So I'm just really genuinely excited to be here with you. And so I've wanted to. So classical theology has been something I've loved for a while, and so being able to do this with a great friend of mine is a lot of fun. I'm hoping that you guys enjoy watching it. let me know what you think, good, bad, or ugly. Leave a comment. As Jorge said, one thing I think we should be able to do as Christians is to be able to disagree as friends and have conversations that are interesting and fun. That's what we did at ETS all weekend. And so I hope you enjoy the show. I hope you look forward to other shows as I did. And if you want shows on certain topics, let us know what you think and what you're interested in. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun, man. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. And with that being said, we'll see you here, Lord willing, next week. And make sure that you go to the Mysterium Files, subscribe, because we're having another one of these, Lord willing, tomorrow. And that is, remind me of the time.
11:30 a.m. Eastern.
11:30 a.m. Eastern. Maybe we need to push it up a little bit. I don't know. I'll let you know at the end of the program. And we will try to schedule it so you guys can hit the notification bell so you'll be reminded when we go live. And with that being said, God bless you. Good night. See you here next week, Lord willing.
Thanks for watching. Take care, guys.